Hello, everyone. Good morning. Hope your day started good. Had a little bit of coffee in me this morning, so raring to go. Was reading about David this morning, and God led me to some verses in 1 Peter as I was studying that. 1 Peter 5, 7 and 8, which says, and again, don't quote me word for word, but it says, "Be humble, for the Lord will exalt you in due time." And then verse 8 says, "Be sober and vigilant. Your adversary, the devil, roars around like a lion, seeking to devour you." And humility, and that's kind of what it's on my mind this morning. Why is humility important? Well, if we look at David, which I was studying this morning, in 2 Samuel chapter 11, David was at home. Now it says that this was a time that kings normally went to war. They were on the battlefield. But David decided that he'd stay home. You know, most of his big battles had been conquested, been won. No reason for him to go out. He thought he'll just stay at home. And it says after he'd had him a little nap, he wakes up, he's walking on the roof, and he sees a beautiful woman bathing. He inquires of who it is, and they tell him it was another man's wife. He sleeps with her, he gets her pregnant. Then we go through a series of him covering it up. In that, he murders the woman's husband. And, you know, if you'll keep reading, there's lots of things that transpire where he tries to cover it up, but you can't hide it from God. Try as you might, you can't hide it from God. So, what does that have to do with humility? Well, I think David was a little bit puffed up about who he was. And I think he was struggling with life a little bit. If we deduct the time frame that this happened, David was about 50 years old. So David was very close to my age. And I suspect David looked in the mirror and saw what I see and what you see. You know, we got gray hair happening. I'm almost 50, or I'm 50. David was thinking, man, I wonder if I still got it. Will beautiful women think about me the same way they did when I was 30 or 20 or whatever it is? I think we can call that a midlife crisis. You know, that's what I'm going to call it. But, which again is the opposite of humility. I need to prove myself to myself. So, David does what he does. And Satan took it from there. Now, the other part of that is, one, David wasn't being humble in his own physical life. The second part is, David wasn't being humble in his spiritual life. David had 20 years, basically, of spiritual prosperity. You know, you think about how God had watched over him and how David had been so faithful. The same David who would not cut part of the robe off, or who was ashamed because he cut part of the robe, would not kill Saul because Saul was the appointed king. Even though he had every right to want to kill Saul and to actually kill Saul. But he did not do that. And he was upright. David, the man who we read God says is after his own heart. 20 years he had enjoyed spiritual success. And this one day, he goes out and he lets temptation get the best of him. Because he was in a place that he shouldn't have been. That's why the Bible tells us that this was when kings were normally at war. That means David wasn't supposed to be there. But he gotten lazy. Just like we all do. Just like I do and you do. We get lazy every now and then. I can go through spans of where I'm, at home and I'm working on projects. I'm at it and I'm full force. And I'm ready to work. And then I can go through spans where I just don't want to do anything. I'm just going to sit back and relax and watch a little TV and sit in the recliner. Same thing can be true in our spiritual life. There are times that we're closer to God than we are at other times. And that we're in the Word and we're praying and we're being servants as we're supposed to be. And obedience isn't as difficult as it is in other times. And then there's times where it's hard. And we just don't want to do it. That's where David was. He just didn't feel like it was time. So he was in a place that he didn't need to be. Just like we can be. When we're being spiritually lazy, we're in a place that we don't need to be. And what causes that? Well, it's caused by pride. You know what, God, I've done enough. I'm going to be honest. I can think that in my life sometimes. I do all of these things, God. I do service here and here and here. And I don't, let somebody else do it. And when I'm like that, I'm not being humble. Because a humble person would say, God, I'm doing this, but it doesn't measure up to what you've done for me. Not even close. What else do you want me to do? What else do you want me to do, King Jesus, so that I can please you? Because if I'm not here to please you, then I have no reason to be here. We have a purpose on this planet. If we did not have a purpose on this planet, the minute that I was saved, God would have just took me on up to heaven. He'd have said, man, you're saved, come on. It's time to go. But that's not what he did. So, humility says, what more can I do? And when we fall out of that, those verses fall right hand in hand. Be humble. And then right after that, Peter follows with, because your enemy, the devil, is like a lion seeking to devour. If you ever watch National Geographic, I love to watch the lions. And man, they are skilled hunters. They can sit in that, they can maneuver around in that tall grass and you can't even see them moving. And then the next thing you know, bam, they've eat you. just because the animals let their guard down a little bit. They get a little too close to that grass over there where that lion's hiding. That's why God doesn't want us over at the edge. Don't be on the fringe. Because when you're over on the fringe, then that's where you can get eaten. It's kind of like a big, like a football field. If I'm standing, let's say I'm in a football field and all around it is a high fence and I can't see what's on the other side. What's over there awaiting me. If I'm standing on the 50-yard line right in the middle, I don't have to worry. I can see around me clearly. But that's not where we like to stand a lot of times as Christians. I want to be with God always. But I'd like to see what's going on with people that aren't with God. I'd like to see what's going on in the world, because there's some really, looks like some cool things going on. And there's some things there that I really used to like to do. And I bet they're still fun. And that was kind of what David was thinking there when this happened. And because of that, because he had lost his humility, because he allowed Satan to attack him, he ended up losing 4 children. And the kingdom of Israel was split because of that one act that led to another act, that led to another act of sin that was way more than David wanted to pay. And the problem is that we look at what's in front of us and we see what we gain, but we never measure what we're going to lose. And that's part of humility. We can't rely on the last 20 years of prosperity, the last 20 years of spiritual success, because tomorrow and today is another day. And if I'm not depending on God to keep me strong, depending on our support system. That's why, a lot of people talk about church. You can be saved without going to church. You absolutely can. But you need those brothers and sisters to help support you, to keep you accountable, if nothing else. I can't keep myself accountable. I'm not strong enough. I want other people to depend on me and for me to depend on them. And when that happens, then I can stay humble. Then I can stay where God wants me to be. And I'm not like David at home when I should have been somewhere else. So that's my prayer for you, and my prayer for me today is that we stay humble. That we don't look at what our past successes were. Because one, they weren't my successes. They were his. They weren't mine. They're his. It's all his. And always remember, again, what did I do to earn my salvation? Nothing. Nothing. And that's what Paul tells us. In Ephesians, it's not of you, so you can't boast about it. Everything I've done for the kingdom is not of me, because if it was up to me, I'd have done something else. I wouldn't have done what God has called me to do. I'd do something else. I'd do some of those things that I used to enjoy to do that I didn't need to do, that were actually killing me. So stay humble. That's my prayer for you and for me. And be sober and vigilant. Pay attention. Because Satan, if he can't destroy you, if you're saved, he can't have you. But he can have the people around you that are not saved. So all he can do is try to destroy your witness before them. And there's nothing more valuable than that. God bless you. I love you. Have a great day.